All right, welcome. Please take a comfortable posture. Sitting quietly is not easy um, because we're all taught to be good little children and we were taught to sit still in school and whatnot. So we know how to physically sit still, most of us. But that's not really what, you just sit there and have your mind go crazy. So sitting quietly, actually sitting quietly, it's not easy to do. And for many people, it's not really where they're at with their practice. They need something else to help slow them down. They can't just sit. So sometimes they have, if they're trying to just sit, they are sitting still physically. Maybe they do some breath work, some mantras, visualization to help them, but not for the length that we do it. We sit with a level of rigor that you got to be ready to sit. You got to be ready to confront that frontier in this work. How do you know that you're ready? Well, you're here. But even still, sometimes you need to do a little bit of that stupefying, lulling the mind, breath work, mantra, visualization to settle into it. And once you're here, it's like, yeah, this is my practice now. I sit still. I just observe very quietly, very astutely. And you're getting to that place where you're just observing and sitting, patient, humble, quiet, inquisitive. We can then sort of examine this inner world, the world of emotions and thoughts, beliefs. Really, it's the stories we tell about ourselves and the world. And all those stories ultimately are pretend ourself in the world because there isn't a separate self from the world. It's a story in the inner world. Learning to be still is a confrontation with those stories to some extent. It's the recognition that they're not going to get it done for us. It's not going to be good enough. Listening to those stories and trying to make them come true. Rather, sitting still, being stillness, is letting those things exhaust themselves, tire themselves out, understanding that we don't have to feed them anymore, and that the beauty and the delight and the freedom that we seek is actually outside of our dreams, not in them. The ego tries to make up a story of, I get this, I do this, if things go this way, then I'll be happy, free, whatever. And if you really believe that about a certain circumstance, then you go do that. Don't sit still, go do it. But for harder things, perhaps, or you maybe just come to the recognition at some point that there's a deep yearning for a happiness that can't be found with the world. That just being what you are, really being what you are, knowing it through and through, has a value, has the value. And so your body might go about doing things, snorkeling in a river, but the mind isn't seeking gratification from any activity. It just isn't an option anymore. The body, person, your life can continue to unfold. Honestly, it will be more joyful because you won't be trying to extract a feeling out of your life. You'll just be watching and present with whatever your life is. So, sitting quietly is this confrontation with that inner struggle where we try to make our ego impose on the world, wanting things to be different in some way, somehow, down to the finest detail. Sitting quietly brings us into communion with the edge of ourself. And slowly, the edges, we get closer and closer to what we actually are until the pretend me inside the world disappears. Not everyone's ready to sit like that. It's not an interest. But for the few who have that interest, it becomes a requirement. If you've got that fidget feeling, try something to stupefy the mind. Focus on your breath. Count your breath. So we can learn to just sit quietly, undisturbed. Something like boredom is really just the memory that doing and acting in the world has a benefit. It's just that memory makes a feeling called boredom. Oh, if I was doing something out in the world, I wouldn't be bored anymore, but I'm just doing nothing. Oh, I'm bored. And so you can think, oh, what is it that I'm bored of? You're bored of having memories of the past, living in the past. In this way, you can learn to conquer boredom. Frustration Is the feeling like what you're doing right now, you should already have the result? You want to rush along the result. You think that by sitting here, you're going to get something later on. Because you don't have it right now, frustration exists. Just another story in the mind. This present moment should look like this future moment. And I'm frustrated that it doesn't. I'll have more happiness in the future moment. Just a story in the mind. Boredom. I remember doing activity X, Y, or Z was more fun than just what I'm doing right now, sitting here. And I want that feeling of X, Y, or Z again. I don't want to just sit here. I'm so bored. Boredom is just a story of the past that you want again. All thoughts and feelings are like this. Spend a few moments with them, see them, realize that's what's going on. Just start to move on from it. See the story in your mind. See it as a story you're telling. For some reason, it's compelling. And you look around it, you look beyond it. That story, every thought stream, It it moves through a landscape. We'll call it the mindscape, almost like a backdrop. The next time you're in a story, try to see that there's a backdrop. There's something behind or around the story in your mind. It's just this empty, blank, canvas like awareness. Try to find it. It's there. It's there when the story's there. It's there when the story fades away. Really try to see around the story. Look into that backdrop closely. It'll destroy boredom, destroy frustration. It's interesting. It's fascinating. There's this space of consciousness, this space of awareness, just sitting there, quiet, being present, unaffected, doesn't care what's going on in your story. It's just there. Even the brightest imagination could not imagine something like this. But any person can, no matter their background, upbringing. It's available to everyone. It's right there, behind a story, outside of it. As you grow comfortable with it, the strangest things will come up. Stories long forgotten. In the same practice, maybe you have to understand it. Why is that arising? What's going on there? What's the feeling that has now had a chance to surface? But in the end, whether it's something trivial or something deep, you can still see beyond it because it's just a story. Stories, they can take us away. They can make us feel marvelous things, but they can't ever tell us the truth. It's just not how they work. But try not to confuse your stories for the truth. What's true is what's not changing, what's staying very quiet and still and observant. This blank canvas behind the thoughts and feelings, behind the story. Remember it. Stay true to it. Beyond the story, but not quite this blank canvas, is pure senses. It can be touch, just feeling the body in space. It can be just an empty gaze, seeing the colors of light. What's very nice, though, sometimes is the sounds. Before you label them rain or anything, whatever it is you may be hearing, there's just the sound. And as you rest more in the backdrop and less in your stories, those pure sounds will just exist as pure sound. Otherwise, they just become things that you add to a story. So try it. Work with what you're hearing in your room after I close my mouth, of course. Work on what you're hearing in your space with your ears. Try not to label it, define it, just hear it. Invariably, unless you're a perfected being who resides in perfect stillness, your mind will overlay. It'll run distortion on the sound, label it, define it, and then eventually make up a story. All of a sudden, that story has nothing to do with the original sound. Try it. See if you notice this. Focus on whatever sound is in your space. Really listen. And then notice that the beginnings of a story, of memories, start to arise in the mind. See where it goes. Whether you're with the sound, with a memory, or with a story, notice the backdrop of pure witnessing, the quiet, still watching. Watch it more closely, more clearly. It's not really in the background, it's everywhere. You could put it in the foreground because it's everywhere. You just have to see it that way. It's part of the power of something that's always there. If you want it, it can disappear completely. You just forget, you get lost in a story. It forgets what it is. Try to make it everywhere. Try to really just recognize it is everywhere. let the backdrop become more than a backdrop, when you let it become expansive, encompassing, complete, this is when you can really understand sitting quietly. Because that's what it's doing. It's sitting quietly. And we're running amok all over it. But it's still sitting quietly. And eventually, no matter what you do, it's going to absorb all of this. You make the backdrop expansive and complete. All motion, all thought, all feeling, even the stories. It's all just sitting quietly. Relax your body. Pause the recording and we'll do discussion.